I'm going to introduce Jessie Contour, Professor Jessie Contour, teachers on our program. She's going to be moderating the panels tonight.
Thank you. Okay. I'm the local moderator. So thanks everybody for coming. Our first panel is on the XR knowledge transfer, and it's all about how academia and industry can work together. So we have a collection of panelists that can kind of talk about this industry from both sides, and I'm gonna welcome them up. First up, we've got Josh Bankston. Josh works at Mace Labs. Next, we have David Cohen. Thank you. This one's mine. You go there. David, you're in the middle. Thank you. David is one of the faculty in our program. And last but not least, Patrick Curry. Yeah. All right.
My Price is Right moment.
Thanks for having us.
$30.
I feel like I'm in class because there's nobody in the front row except for...
Are you nervous? You can move forwards. No?
Extra credit on the bonus test. I mean,
All right, so before we dig into my questions, I wanted to give our panelists a moment to introduce themselves and talk about what their role is and how they connect to this topic of XR. So I'll start with Josh here.
yeah, thank you so much. I'm actually chapter president of the VRARA in Houston. I also am head of tech and services at Mace Virtual Labs. I've been in VR for the last 13 years. I'm an evangelist for the industry, especially when it comes to bringing innovative solutions to market. So I focus entirely on the B2B stack. So we talk a lot about cognition and research and sciences and what that means to businesses.
Hey, I'm David Cohen. I've been I started in the games industry in the late 90s, and I started education about 10, 11 years ago, something like that. So what I found was I've been working for companies like Warner Brothers, Disney, National Geographic, Mattel, Oddworld, Shell Games, like everything from major media companies to small game development studios, and they've all experimented with all these different types of platforms. But as I was working in the industry, I started gearing more towards educational and games for health and things like that. And I found it's actually easier to work in academia in that area than it is in the major game studios and movie studios. They're not really interested in medical games as much. So that's why I ended up here, and I'm one of the faculty members here, and teach a class called Games Are Good. It's great.
Thanks, David.
Nice to meet you all.
Patrick.
Hey, y'all. I'm Patrick Curry, and if you can't tell, I'm the resident goofball on this panel. I've spent most of my career making video games. And today I run a video game studio called Farbridge. We're headquartered here in Austin. We have about 30 people who work across the entire country. We make video games for everything with a screen, I like to say, so phones, consoles, PCs, Xboxes, PlayStations. But about half of our work has been in the VR and AR space, and we've also dabbled in games for good, doing some mental health games and games for education. So yeah, excited to talk about that and lend my perspective from the gamer side of things.
All right, thank you guys. So just so y'all know, we will have some time for questions at the end. So as we talk, if something comes up, hang on to it. We'll have time for you. So I want to kick off the panel to talk a little bit about the intersection between us and how XR changes when you approach it from the academic side versus the industry side. So XR development really thrives at this intersection. We see a lot of amazing projects, and research is fueling innovation, and businesses are driving real-world applications. And I want to see where these kinds of collaborations are working really well. So David, you've explored how XR can enhance learning, play, rehabilitation in your research. And Josh, you've worked on several successful university industry collaborations. And I was wondering if we could start with you guys sharing an example where you thought XR really made a meaningful impact and why you thought it worked well. Hey, David?
I think I'm going to have you start on that one.
Sure. So from an industry perspective, collaboration really thrives when you have the right champions. And let me preface that by also saying champions that are empowered with the right assets and backing behind the institution. So when we go in and work with academia, it's oftentimes to find who that champion is, what they're trying to implement, how they're trying to implement it, and then how do we shape and frame what their outcomes are with the ROI of business. Because it's one thing to say, I have a cool idea, I want to implement it, I want to showcase it. It's a whole nother thing to be able to take that out of academia and see it in practice. Because business wants something, most times, commercial off the shelf. They want something that's ready to go, that's proven, that's data-driven, that's backed by empirical data sets. We're trying to take XR technology and get out of anecdotal, I feel like, I think I did. I truly promise you that my boss, yes, I definitely understood it, to an empirical data set that said, this works, this works, this works, and we can back it by the science.
So I think that that is the right way of approaching it. That's not how big companies necessarily always work. So, and when I say that, I'm saying that right now, a lot of companies are jumping on board things because of sizzle names. They jump on AI, they jump on the internet, they jump on different things because they want to stay competitive with the industry. They want to not be the last person to come out with something if it is the $1 million idea. So every studio was going to do VR something because none of the studios wanted to be the last one to do it. But none of them are thinking, a lot of them are jumping ahead based on what people are telling them in the sales pitch, but not thinking about how it actually works and functions. The example that Patrick and I were talking about before, I was running a games group at a major toy company, which shall remain nameless, and they gotten seriously burnt on a VR product that they put out because they're putting out their own proprietary hardware. And it was a perfect idea of something, a product that lends itself to VR, but they weren't thinking about, they were just thinking they were going to brand it VR, throw it out there, and everyone would buy it. But they weren't thinking about what is the need of the VR audience? What is the need of an audience that doesn't do VR normally and now is suddenly given a VR headset and they don't know how to use it? None of the actual flow, the user flow of we're making this experience was there, but not the flow of, is this the right experience? Or are we designing the hardware in a right way that will work? And so the ways that they can do this is this verification, all these things need to happen, but they have to happen before it even hits the big companies.
Absolutely.
And somebody needs to pay for all that. And the big companies are not going to pay for all that. They're going to pay for somebody who's already done it all. So that's the area where it's not Warner Brothers is going to go start a VR company, have this, do all this, do all this. They're going to be contacting other companies that are smaller that specialize in these areas. And that's really, it's that collaboration that is the only way for, in my opinion, for it to work.
A lot of times in business, it's a race to second. No one wants to be first and bear the cost of that innovation. They want to see it proven out in the market. What I'm bullish on is the fact that now we're out of pilot purgatory in a lot of places. And so there's evidence across industry verticals that showcases that it works. And so now we have a better tie back to academia to say, these are the industry verticals that are already finding success. Can we do a focus group? Can we do a case study? Can we publish a white paper that then feeds into that business?
Yeah, I want to give Patrick a minute. I do have a response. That's great. That's great. No.
Yeah. So Patrick, let me tee you up. So I think there's something really interesting here that we're talking about. There's a disconnect between how industry approaches innovation with new technology, where they're kind of moving fast, race to perhaps second, versus the academic approach, where we're very used to really long cycles. We're tied to that academic calendar. It's like a year by year by year, like really long kind of process to get anything happening. And so when we want to team up, there's a disconnect kind of in how we can accomplish our goals based on these timelines that are clashing. So Patrick, I wonder, is there a way to get past this? How do we get past that disconnect in the collaboration? Do you think we can rethink collaboration? What do you think about that?
Thanks for starting with an easy one. Yes, I think we can absolutely enhance collaboration, get past some of these hurdles. Just being in the same room and talking about these things is a big help to understand that different entities, different firms, different bureaucracies have different priorities and processes, and y'all might call something different than we call something, and getting over those hurdles is really important. And we found, especially when we did our Games for Good projects, that we spent so much time on education. We made a 30-page book explaining what VR and AR is for the Smithsonian when we did a project with them. Because they came to us and they said, hey, we saw what y'all did with Oculus and we want to do a Google Glass project. And we were like, do you mean Google Cardboard? And they're like, yeah, that one. And so that really set the stage for us. So we knew what we were dealing with. And so we really went over the top to explain to them what our approach was and what we called these things. And it was great. It was really fun because then, they invited us to DC to showcase our work. And that was very rewarding for us to see, I think it was the premier or president of Armenia, using our virtual reality headset. And it was a branded Google Cardboard with a big Farbridge logo on it. And that was really cool. That was a great payoff. So I think it all starts with communication. I think it starts with being in the same room and finding a shared language and then figuring out the shared goals. There's almost always shared goals between parties. We're all pushing towards something, and finding the places where that they overlap and push each other forward faster, better, stronger. I don't know exactly what that is, but I think it's going to be case by case, and each one's going to start with that conversation.
I love that example of Google Glass, Google Cardboard, of just the technology. Put it on my face.
I just want to add one more kind of thing here. And
then I have another question for you that relates.
Oh, so. Well, then maybe you should ask that question. Maybe it's responding to that. Okay. I don't know. It's
Yeah, so it's actually related to what you were talking about, Patrick, where there's these design challenges where the companies are trying to get the new technology. They're trying to hop on this new thing that's evolving so quickly. But there's some tough questions about where and when to invest and what is actually the right technology for the project you're trying to build. Is it Google Glass or is it Google Cardboard, right? And so, David, this kind of comes back to your work. You've built projects and done research projects across different media, different platforms, and you found the right ones for the work that you're doing. So what does that process look like? How do you make that decision of one versus the other?
And that's where I think industry actually has an advantage over academia. So if we want to, as academia, I want to do anything with a human subject and I want to publish my findings, I have to get it approved by many, many different parties, every question. Any of you do play testing and focus testing and stuff and you're just asking questions. Imagine having to write every single question before you even have a concept for an idea for a project, and having to ask every scenario and then having to get that all approved. One of the projects I'm working on, not only the office that has to approve all of those questions, we had to get a letter from the FDA to prove that they didn't think our device was going to hurt people. So it was this year-long process, and a game studio can just walk up, or an XR studio can just walk up to people. I remember when I was working at a toy company, we went to the local mall and just asked people focus test questions there. You get a lot more freedom with that, so you can it's a much easier process of finding the right tool. The challenge that I find when we're working in industry is that we're gonna make an XR experience, we're gonna make a VR experience. We're not going, this is a problem we're trying to solve. Is XR the right? Is VR, is it mobile game, is a physical experience, a digital experience? So it's about in this era that we are trying to get the technology to a place where it's commercially available and we know it well enough where it's not a bubble, that it actually has value. It has to be, it becomes just part of a tool of your tool set. Just like you wouldn't say, I'm gonna make a Photoshop experience. Photoshop is a tool that you're using, XR is a tool that you're using. And so we're doing a project right now for using an immersive lab that we're gonna be checking out in our happy hour at the end. And we're building a project to help people with stroke rehabilitation for dealing with balance and gait. Now, we looked at the challenges there, and we looked at what we're experimenting with, and so will a mobile game work with that? I'm not sure how much a mobile game does with balance and gait. So logical things where natural motion would make sense, but then we're also trying to think, is an immersive lab, because we're also going to be we're going to make an at-home version of it so people can continue doing the physical therapy at home, but then is a VR experience in the people that we've interviewed who are stroke survivors, a VR experience might be too visually overwhelming. And then they can't focus on the things that you need to. An immersive lab might be too overwhelming. So what we're doing is we're testing these things out with the people, and you first need to get those approvals, and then we're actually working with those folks. So right now we're just interviewing people, and we're not publishing the findings that we're finding, but it's still a much slower process. On the flip side, On the flip side, once we get to the point where we built something, now we need to clinically test it. That's going to take a year or two. How many game development studios or XR studios can sit around with their team not working for a couple months to a year with no other projects to work on? And then if they're working on another project, do they jump back to the other ones? So we're just about to start clinical testing with one of the games we're focusing on diabetes that you'll see up there. It's going to be in medical facilities, but then we're not going to have the team able to work on it again for many, many months, or we're going to have to go to a whole new team and so that was the challenge that I faced when I was in the industry, is that getting educators involved when you're dealing an education project, they're not part of the team, they're like somebody that you hire, but now we're in a world where we hire narrative designers instead of having a freelancer do the narrative design. We have somebody working with the team. So you need somebody working with the team from the beginning for all the medical aspects and the educational aspects, but then you also need to wait around for things to be made. So that was my little soapbox.
I want to pick up on that. From a business and industry perspective, our organization works with close to 100 academia-driven institutions. And this is key and critical. There are so many organizations out there that are ready and willing to sell X named academia institution a product. Mm-hmm. But they are focused entirely on, can I get you into an iPad? Can I give you a Dell notebook or whatever it may be? Mm-hmm. Finding the right partner that truly understands what it means to be an XR, what it means to go through those pain points and be the champion on the industry side is, I found, that recipe for success. Mm. Because otherwise, what ends up happening is a lot of folks trying to divert you from what you were trying to initially achieve. And then you end up with a wholly different product, a wholly different solution, right? The right tool for the right job.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd like to talk a little bit more about that idea of champions, Josh. So when you're looking for an internal champion for a new project or a new technology, depending on how it's framed, what are you looking for? What do you try to have people tee up and kind of commit to? If they're going to be the champion, what does that look like?
I mean, somebody's got to take the ball and run with it, right? And if we just play a bunch of games of designed by committee and everyone looks at the hot potato on the ground and no one picks it up, then we already know that that project's probably going to be dead in the water, right? Finding the folks that are passionate about it, and largely all these organizations have somebody that is passionate about what is potentially, what is the possibility? What can we achieve if I had the resources, if I had the team, if I had the assistance and everything that needs to be given to the project in order to see its completion? But it's beyond just that individual, because let's face it, we're all overburdened. We already are all overtasked, and we do not need another project where we're doing everything ourselves. It's finding those partners internal to the organization and external and identifying who's going to hand that ball off when. And then the organization themselves has to empower that champion. They have to give the resources. Is it extra time? Is it professional development hours and credit for what they're trying to achieve in their normal course of their responsibilities? And then you can't clone somebody. You have to be able to hand that off. It's entirely one thing to say, let's build a cool project, let's see it through to completion, and we're done. It's another thing entirely, and what's really important to me and I'm passionate about in this industry is scale. Taking one project and seeing it through is great. I want to see you 5 years from now saying, we took 10 headsets and now we're at 10,000 headsets. And now we're across the entirety of University of Texas. We're in every single campus. We have this as a resource at all the libraries for students to check out, for local people to check out, because they can see the efficacy, they can see the proof is in the pudding. again, you have to find not only that person that's going to run with the ball, but somebody who has the access and resources to push behind them to find that trickle-down effect to train the new champion, to train the new generation.
This is great. You guys are teeing up all my transitions. So, Patrick, I want to jump on this a little bit with you. So, I imagine we have this new technology. We have this champion. The company is buying in and giving them time and resources. But I wonder if it's not just that. It's also mission, right? Like, what is this project? So you were talking about your Games for Good project. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about how the mission in a project like that can kind of help with the sustainability of a project.
Yeah, happy to. So to tell you a little bit more about the project we did with the Smithsonian is they had an initiative to preserve cultural heritage sites in Armenia in fascinating locations. One was a church, and I think there was also some residences there, and it was like some of the oldest ever human shoes were recovered there, artifacts there, and some of the earliest artifacts of human winemaking were there. And so, you know, a site of fascinating cultural significance and historical significance. And they partnered with another group that was actually our partners, was a nonprofit called SciArc based in the Bay Area. And they were founded specifically for a mission of preserving and sharing human heritage through digital means. And so they had done an amazing photo shoot and almost like a film shoot on this location to create three-dimensional assets. And then they partnered with our firm very early in our existence, and we did all of the software development, and then worked with them to stitch it together with some of the game design techniques of storytelling, user interface, usability, things like that. And so we lucked out, and the Smithsonian had this very specific mission for that year. They had a partner in the nonprofit sector, and that was their entire reason for existing, was projects like this, and they had received a grant to do it. And then we got to partner with these technology companies and their objective was, hey, share this technology, show that it can be used for cool, interesting, and exciting things. And so that was great. And that's really a project I'm happy to brag about and share, because there was early alignment, great communication, and things went swimmingly. Did I answer the question?
That's an amazing sounding project. I got to say, was there a home version of it? Like,
Yeah. So actually,
Drink a lot of wine.
So I had to do so much research, y'all. So the reason that we actually got involved was that they had an event in Washington, D.C., and our tech director, Taylor Gates, got to go there and show off our work. But they realized that they only had a couple PCs that could even run VR. And, you know, we've been waiting for 10 years for this VR audience to emerge, and sadly, I'm still waiting. But they knew that there was going to be like 10,000 people in Washington, D.C., and they were going to have two measly computers and VR headsets. And so their idea was, hey, well, maybe this Google Cardboard thing could actually be used. And so what we did is we created a home version or a phone version of the app that could work in a Google Cardboard, which is, if you're not familiar with Google Cardboard, it's a fascinating little gadget that Google invented, which is it looks like a cereal box of cardboard that you punch out and then fold like origami to create a little VR headset, and then your phone goes in it and you hold it together with rubber bands, and then you can turn your head around and see a 3D stereoscopic image as if you were there. And so we said, yes, that sounds great. And we ordered these custom printed cardboards to hand out. But then we also realized, well, if we're going to put this on the App Store, it's pretty onerous to be like, well, you have to have a VR viewer for your phone. There's not even an industry term for what that thing is. And so what we did is we actually made what we called the Magic Window version of the app, where you can download it. I think it's still out. And you can just hold your phone or your iPad up and look around as if you're in this historical site in Armenia and see and explore the 3D world. And then if you tap the VR button, it goes into split screen, and then you can put that into a cardboard, a viewer or a ViewMaster or any of those devices that hold phones and make them into a VR headset. So very lucky, very fortunate. We were at the right place, right time for that project.
That's an amazing project. Okay, so before we move into audience Q&A, that's a hint, right? I want to give you guys one chance. We'll do a little dreaming. I think this is a fun way to end the panel. So we're looking ahead to the future. We're here because we believe that XR has the potential to transform industries in ways we can only begin to imagine. So maybe let's use our imagination. What can we do now for the future of XR? Are we targeting new industries? Are we using AI? It's a very hot word right now. How can we lay the groundwork now for a more successful future with XR? Josh, you want to?
Yes, the ever-present question: what will XR be in the future? So I've been fond of saying recently that if XR is the canvas, AI is the brush. We are getting very quickly to a time and space where these tools matured together will allow us to create at the speed of imagination. And humanity itself has never had access to such a broad set of tools. And so we will be able to unlock a level of creativity and innovation that we haven't seen to this day. So I'm very excited to see where these tools will take us. And what can you do now is get in the headset, go do it. Because me explaining to you what it's like to be in an immersive experience is like me explaining what it's like to ride a roller coaster. I can give you every buzzword under the sun, but until you sit in that seat and you ride that ride, you won't know what it's like to do it for yourself. So I encourage you to do that.
Thank you. David?
Oh boy. Well, Patrick and I were talking about this a little bit. Do you mind if I go ahead and? One of the challenges that I see as working as someone who makes games is that the term games communicates something to the audience. And if the audience doesn't think they play games, even my mom would never consider herself a gamer, but she would spend endless hours playing video game solitaire on her computer. She was probably a more hardcore gamer than I was. She probably played it more than I did. But the thing is that if I asked her to play a video game, in her mind, it just switches off. There's a button. And one of the things I found in doing the research when I'm working with medical professionals, they hear video game, they might be using UI that's the exact same thing on the medical equipment. They can't learn that, but they can't learn video game because of the word, right? So I find this, I get very frustrated with the term AI because it's a marketing term, in my opinion. A lot of this is technology we've already had, and now we're calling it AI.
Absolutely.
Procedurally generated content.
Absolutely.
Like, when my students get angry about it, I'm like, you're already doing that. When you do the blur feature on Photoshop, that's AI. But now it's on steroids. And when my Games for Good class, I'm like, AI can speed up cancer research, and in like a couple weeks, we can get data that would take normally years to develop. So yeah, AI is also gonna save lives and things like that. But people are turned off by terms. If I walk up to somebody who is at a food bank and I say, hey, you wanna check out an XR experience? That is going to turn them off.
Watch
right?
this video instead.
Yeah, well, they're going to think, oh yeah, you use a VR headset. Well, VR headset, I can't afford a VR headset, but they're thinking that this is exclusive to someone that's an upper level than they are. And I'm making projects for people of all people, but mostly socioeconomically targeted ones. And this is also, we were working in the educational ones. We were also looking for socioeconomic. But so the thing is that I think when I stop using the term AI and I start saying what it is, when I stop using the term the cloud is the example I give, because no one says the cloud anymore. They just say save it on a server. You had to explain this really complicated concept of what the cloud was to a lot of people, so we started using the term cloud. So the thing is, I think the best thing is changing the terminology and saying we're making experiences that are interactive, immersive, or whatever they are. Don't call them XR, but just say that these are all the different things that could happen within it. And I think that for consumer side, they're gonna understand it and digest it better. I mean, we're in a world where people think museums are for the wealthy. They don't think that they're for the average person. So we have to think when we're talking about the consumer is what are they gonna think is something for other people and what do they think is gonna be something for them? And it's just easing them into it. And I think we've been there. We've been easing into it. Now I think we're ready for that point to let's take the XR name on it, use it internally when we're talking about the business side, but then call all of these different things, games, XR, VR, all these different things by different terms that consumers can understand better and feels it's more for them.
All the R's?
All the R's, yeah. Anything that's just two initials, I think we need to change it to a full word. So experience design, ooh, I had that.
No more buzzwords. Got it.
Yeah, I'm similarly allergic to acronyms. Those are really tough answers to follow. As far as how do we plan and look ahead for this emerging technology? Like I said, I've been waiting for about 10 years for this audience to arrive, and I think I was thinking about it as, well, this is going to be next, and this is going to replace phones. And clearly that has not happened. In the last 10 years, I've become more attached and addicted and inseparable from my phone than ever before. And I think that's probably true of most of my colleagues and friends. But the thing that we are seeing that's very interesting is there's a young audience, very, very excited in VR, doing it a whole lot. And as a game maker, I've been waiting for this mature market to arrive where there's tons of people who want to, spend time in VR and spend $50 on a game or a movie-like game and experience it just the way that I want to as a game creator. And that just hasn't materialized. And the industry is suffering, this year for it. But I think what we are seeing is we're seeing a generation of kids. I'm going to call them kids because they're actually kids. They're 10 to 13 years old. They probably received a VR headset for the holidays before they had a phone. It was their first digital device. It was their first social device. They were spending time in games like Gorilla Tag, and this is the video game where you walk by running your arms like a gorilla. It's ridiculous, and it looks ridiculous, and these kids loved watching it on the YouTubes or TikTok and watching each other be silly. And this is pretty quickly becoming a model for what commercially viable VR looks like for games. And this is new, and we're seeing companies adapt to this, and the games have to be free because these kids don't have money, or they don't have an allowance. Kids don't have an allowance anymore. So the games start free, and there's things to buy inside those games, and they're social first. They're not listen to the story that George Lucas or Uncle Patrick wants to tell. It's them making their own stories with their friends and goofing off and uploading them online. And I think this is really interesting. It's really interesting to see this market emerge in a way that I didn't predict and didn't expect. But it's definitely happening, and I think we're seeing momentum there. And so I'd say to be ready for the next wave of all the Rs, VR, AR, XR, MR, pay attention to what young people are doing in the medium.
For context, Gorilla Tag's eclipsed $100 million as a free-to-play game.
Of revenue.
Of revenue, right.
And it was made by 2 kids.
Yeah.
For maybe, I would estimate it costs less than $50,000 to make.
I will say, from a business perspective, business is just slower to adopt new technology. So, but what we are seeing is a lot of businesses get out of pilot purgatory and are turning towards scale, especially in education. Education is a big adopter of XR tools.
Who knew the solution is headsets for babies?
Well, it's fascinating because for years Oculus said this is not for anyone under the age of 13. And it was probably because they didn't pay for the medical studies to prove that it wasn't going to make them go blind.
Right.
But that's been who our audience is.
And the online component, because they don't want to violate COPPA compliancy where you have to put your email address in and crap.
Who knew Meta wasn't concerned with regulation?
But
all right. So I'm gonna cut us off for the chit chat. I believe we have an audience mic. I see it over there. So we have some time for questions. What are y'all wondering about? Any questions come up on this intersection of academia and industry, development, the future?
Has anyone here not tried VR before? Raise your hand. Oh, brave. Thank you. Appreciate it. So we'll fix that today for you.
Oh yeah, we got one here.
Thank you very much for this amazing panel. I actually am wondering, with all the new VR goggles coming out, but everything seems to be passed through, is VR kind of dying because it's too isolating, or do you still see that VR is still full going ahead and AR is just next to it? Because I feel like these two realities are now both in goggles when they before were kind of like one was more on the phone or on pads and the other one was the goggle?
I'll be bold and say yes, VR is too isolating. It is a core problem with the medium. I don't want to trip over my dog doing VR in my house. And yeah, I think things like pass-through video where you can still see the outside world through the goggles and then combine that imagery with the virtual computer rendered imagery is a huge step forward and boon for widespread adoption. My opinion.
I'll take the opposing. I think virtual reality is very important, and I don't think it will ever fully go away. Mixed reality is certainly a powerful tool, and I do believe that eventually all devices will eventually go towards this scalability, like a slider, like I can choose AVP crown style, like how much reality, real reality do I want? But in immersive technology, the ultimate goal is presence. And sometimes that sense of presence is just a Demio game board on our kitchen table as we play together. And sometimes I want to be fully immersed. I want to feel like I'm in the center of the stage and Cirque du Soleil are all around me and they're performing just for me. And it's a private and intimate experience. And so I think moving forward, certainly mixed reality is a very important tool, and it will be more important as we evolve this technology. But I think virtual reality is always going to have its place.
My 2 cents is I'm a huge 3D geek. I mean, before VR was a thing, I had stereoscopic technology in my house, and I was always a big 3D geek. That's why I was big onto VR when it first was the big when it started big boom. So the thing for me is I know I'm also a very small audience because I don't like to play multiplayer games and I like to not think about the real world when I'm playing video games. So the last thing I want to do is see my messy living room that needs all the stuff I have to take care of. I want to just see a virtual world, right? But let's say I'm making a project for someone who's had brain damage and they are trying to associate words to objects again. So one of the things that a lot of people who have certain kinds of brain damage are dealing with is they'll look at a vase and they'll look at a bottle and not be able to determine the difference. A pass-through experience can allow you to match up the right thing with the right thing in your home so you can now associate the things. So that can help with that kind of cognitive rebuilding in our heads so we can associate the virtual world. So I think they both have a lot of benefits, and I really think it's going to be like about whether it's going to be an entertainment thing. So like we're talking about, there's a demo upstairs of a training VR experience. And so in that type of thing that it's set up, you can be in any place and you can use that equipment, it's passed through and everything. But then say you're trying to train someone here in this building to work in an oil tanker, or I don't know, tanker, is that what it's called? Oil rig or something? And they have to train in the oil rig with all the safety. You probably need the full experience where you're not seeing a pass-through because it's not specific equipment you're working with, something in a much larger scale. So I think it depends on the market and it depends on the user. But yeah, I agree with you that I hope it doesn't go away. I invested a lot in this 3D technology that I'm into.
The right tool for the right job.
Okay, got another question with the hat?
Yeah, great insight. Thank you. In terms of the frameworks that you guys use, like Unity or Unreal, where do you see that going? Do you see a third competitor coming down the pipe? Are those the only 2 solutions? And then what happened with Euphoria? Those things kind of change up a lot. And if there's an update and you're using animation, it breaks. So what are kind of some of those solutions or bridges that you see?
Really good brief question, brief answer.
Oh, I mean, I'll give you the super short answer, which is Unity and Unreal are both great software packages where you can create 3D experiences, and they have their pros and cons, but they're both still very good at virtual reality and any of these immersive experiences. I do see Godot emerging as the third challenger, and it's spelled G-O-D-O-T.
Open source.
And it's completely open source and completely free. And so the nice thing is that while Unity and Unreal both have ways to start for free, they will ultimately want money from you. Whereas Godot has a growing amount of support because it is completely free, no strings attached, and that's pretty promising. And so I especially think for academia, as well as for industry, where you might not have a traditional business model of selling video games for profit, but making training software for employees. A truly free option is going to be important to have.
If you're an XR and you're a developer, please go and support tools like Godot. It's what it needs. It's like early days of Blender. If you use Blender like way back in the day, you can see like a subtext menu is completely different than a main menu, and things are all over the place, but it's definitely a good tool.
I think we've got time for one more. We'll get our last one here.
So you said businesses are slower to adopt the new technology. What do you think, what has to happen in the AR space or AR/VR space that businesses will adopt more quickly? And when do you think that will be? So that it will be like, oh, today I work on the computer and tomorrow I work on my headset. So when will that be?
Okay, you want me to give my opinion? Okay. As soon as there's an Angry Birds. The worst part of my career was when I would interview with studios and say, we're going to make the next Angry Birds. And I actually tell my students, of course, Angry Birds is so old now, no one would say that, but I would like run if a company says we're going to make the next Angry Birds, because that company went through so much hardship before they actually created Angry Birds. The thing is, we need something that everyone is going to agree on is good, everyone wants to experience, and everyone wants to engage in. And that's the killer app that's going to, the Mario for NES, the Angry Birds for mobile, things like that, because that is something that allows people to understand the technology in a way that doesn't feel complicated. When games were first starting out on mobile, they were either trying to port over, I'm not mobile, but iPhones and things like that, they were trying to port over arcade experiences. They weren't focusing on the touch, they weren't focusing on the motion, and people were like, this is just a video game on my console, and I'm not a console gamer, so I'm not gonna do this. But then Angry Birds, where you just do this, and that's all this rich things. Everyone understood it, so it was a low entry point. Most people, it was free on the Android. That's when it really took off. But I think something that is easily accessible on all devices and that is easy to understand, that's, I think, when we're going to really see something take off.
I want to say, I think the heart of the question is, when are we going to see everyone working with this tool? Because truly, for the folks that are remote connected workers, people that are out on the oil tankers and all those things, they already have these tools and they're using them day to day. There is a robust pipeline of folks that are using very niche, very specific tool sets in AR. But for the broader scope, the big swath, I think the heart of your question, it's a evolution from virtual reality to now where we're in mixed reality. Mixed reality will help give us those innovative moments for individuals and startups and companies to create compelling narratives and solutions in a mixed reality solution, which will then go into augmented reality. The other thing, the other side of this coin of what he's talking about, I think, is we need a wearable that is long-lasting, high-fidelity optics, really capable. And the challenge there is optics are hard. Battery technology is hard. I mean, you look at some of these companies that have dumped literally billions of dollars into the tech, and still we're not able to miniaturize it. So we'll get there, but we have to have both the chicken and the egg at the same time for funding.
Yeah, I think for me it'd be when it's built into the phone that you carry around every day. Can you like unfold your phone and then it's VR, you know? The second I don't have to buy another thing, that's when I'll use it. But thank you everyone so much. Thank you for the questions. Thank you to our panelists. We're gonna take a short break.